I like color coordinating, but I can't quite get myself to buy a brown shirt. It just not going to do it. We all know what brown means when you think of release. And at my I've mentioned at my house we do talk about emotional constipation, and there's truth to that. So this is a meaningful sermon today because I have been giving these for a year now. My first one was Advanced Gratitude a year ago. And I am humbled and grateful as I think about this past year and what it has meant to me. I felt my call to ministry in 2013. I've shared that before. It took me a while to come around and figure things out, and I'm really grateful for my spiritual journey. When I felt my call to ministry, I had a very clear impression to serve the imprisoned and dying. And I have now worked hospice for 6 years, prison for 5. In fact, I'm heading to prison after this, and the hospital for 1. I've been at Steward Hospitals for a year. And one of the things I'm most grateful for in my chaplaincy, my ministry, is the clarity that comes in those intense moments of dying, when it seems like you have no options, when you feel trapped. And I really cherish the insight into human nature. With that introduction, what do you think most people's top priority is? Like, not what they say is most important, but what is actually most important. I like reminding myself that our actions reflect what actually is true. As Maya Angelou says, when people show you what they are, believe them. But we love to live in the world of words. We love to live in the world of wishful thinking. So if you look at someone's actions, this gets ironic. I love irony and paradox. What would you say is most important to people? Money. That's where we put most of our time. That's true. If you ever want a sobering experience, just clock your hours, like what you do in a week, and that will show you who you are, whether you like it or not. What else is important? Relationships, time. The way you spend your time shows what's important. Social media, love. I love that. You are much more enlightened than most people. In my experience, sitting with the dying, sitting with prisoners, the most important thing for most of us is our stories. The stories we tell ourselves. Because as soon as you have a gym membership, you go to the gym, right? But again, it's very difficult to separate out the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we are actually creating. And one thing that we are most attuned to as human beings, as social creatures, is hypocrisy. So we're going to talk about this a bit more, but our brains are evolved to keep us alive. That should not surprise you. But again, ironically, most of us will die for our stories. And we're seeing that a lot, where people are in denial, of what people would rather die with their stories about who they are and what is true intact, rather than shifting the order of operations, which is what my lesson is going to be about today. I'm not going to get into this much, but one of the most challenging things about my hospital job this past year has been withdrawal of life support. This is one of the very most difficult things because people are dying and yet machines are keeping them alive. And they are alive. And I tell you, there is nothing like seeing someone go from coherent and clear to dead in an hour. And it's so difficult. Like this is a time of reckoning. I playfully and perhaps darkly say that no matter what you believe, end of life is judgment day. And withdrawal of care is so hard because family members and nurses feel like they're killing their loved one, making that decision to take off life support. Again, I could tell you the story about the developmentally delayed man who was 33, intellectually 15. And I sat with him and got him his favorite chocolate ice cream and heard his phone calls. And he was gone 2 hours later. Again, really, really powerful. I'm going to talk about order of operations and paradox because by letting go of our stories, we actually get them back. Okay, by raise of hands, whose life has turned out exactly the way you expected? Come on. I'll wait. So this is interesting. For most of us, our order of operations goes like this. We have an idea of what we think should be true, or what we deserve, or who we are, and then we just like try to shove everything into it. And then we get upset and resentful and angry that it doesn't turn out the way we wanted. Not that we know anything about entitlement, right? In our current culture, accountability just isn't fair. And so, like, one thing that I have done in my own life is I freely embrace the phrasing of temper tantrums and pouting, because most of us are toddlers with life skills, maybe not so much life skills, but I just freely admit, I'm like, I am temper tantruming right now and I'll be done with it soon. I'm sorry. So what I see again and again is this incredible loyalty to our stories. And one very important principle in unity is teaching us how loyal our bodies are, because we are the Christ, right? We are divine. We have a tremendous amount of power. And so when we tell our stories, our bodies say, okay, like coming right up. One big helping of negative thinking and self-fulfilling prophecy. But there are multiple layers of stories. There's our wishful thinking. There are the stories that we inherit from our families, the roles that we are told to play, what we are told we need to do. One of the most damaging stories is you can't be too successful or you'll make the rest of us look bad. I've been helping several people in their marriages. And one paradox that I explain is that systems love equilibrium. Systems love things to be the same. It does not matter how unhealthy a system is, it will fight to stay the way it is. And so one of the most challenging paradoxes is that as you get healthier, other people will get angry at you for getting healthier. So the main message that I want to share is, the title of my sermon is Surrender Your Stories, because I like alliteration. I think it's actually called assonance when it's a sibilant, but anyway. But here's the actual message. Let your stories go so that you can let your stories grow. maybe a bit too cutesy, but I like it. It's memorable. Let your stories go so you can let your stories grow. And that's the order of operations that is terrifying. It is so scary to let go and let what actually is develop and flourish. Who keeps a garden or tries to keep any sort of plant life alive? Yeah, gardening is amazing. I want to get better at that. I love cooking. I need to get better at gardening. But gardening, like you can't impose your will on the plant. You can't like rip it up and be like, okay, are you becoming what I think you should be yet? Life really is like a garden. And I think one reason why we live in such a toxic environment right now is because we live in this credit card culture. We live in this social media culture. We live in this culture of filters and expectations. And we are supposed to be in debt forever. That's how the system works. Whereas there is such a beautiful and simple alignment with the way the natural world works. And this is what unity teaches. Unity teaches that we have the seeds of divinity within us. We are divine. And so as we plant, as we realize those seeds, and this month is about weeding. It's about recognizing all the things that are weeds. Dandelions are surprisingly helpful, but recognizing all the things that are weeds and pulling them up, letting them go. And one of the biggest, like we live in a weed field, like Myrtle Fillmore was told that she was sick. She was told that there was no hope, there was no way to heal, that she had a life sentence of being an invalid. They really, just watch old BBC shows and they do invalids really, really well. Just send them to an asylum. But of course, she said, no. I am divine, I'm a child of God, my inheritance is wholeness. And in the beginning, the first step is to name the weed and to say, well, that's not what I want. That's not what I am. And it is a tremendous act of courage and resistance and even revolution. One of my favorite memes says, you're telling me I need self-care when actually I think what we need is a revolution. Because our systems are out of alignment. So for example, one thing that I see at the hospital, this will not be a surprise to you. So what's the purpose of insurance, for example? The purpose of insurance is to facilitate healthcare. The purpose of insurance is so that you can get the healthcare you need, right? If only. As we know, it is now your insurance that determines your level of care. That is not okay. That is not okay. And so the first thing we need to do is we need to name and recognize what is. And the first thing to do is to recognize when we're telling a story, which is all the time. So here is another memorable, perhaps dark summary that has science to back it up. Perception is hallucination. Memory is fiction, and stories are delusions. Okay, I'm done. So, as I said earlier, our brains exist to keep us alive. Our brains are very, very expensive. It's a good thing we have a potluck because our brains take up like 20% of our energy, 25% of our energy. And so in order to be efficient, our brain makes stuff up all the time. And so our brains take in enough data, interpret it, and literally give us a hallucination that is accurate enough to keep us alive until it's not. And so it is literally hallucination. And then every time we remember something, we make it up. So ironically, the things we don't remember are the ones that are the most accurate. And then our stories similar to our brains, they are these inherited narratives that help us navigate life. And that is why it is such a powerful and beautiful thing to be in unity and to live in this powerful tradition that is in tension with the wider cultural narratives, where we can say, no, I am not sick. I am not flawed. I am not a failure. Because again, I've talked about how the current global religion is a consumerist death cult. Talk about a story. Like, what the world wants is for you to be so miserable that you keep buying stuff. Like, that's the agreement that we're in. Whereas it is so powerful to live into this reality that we are divine, we are whole, we are love. And this is what I mean when I say, let the story go so you can let the story grow. And one of the most useful phrases that I have adopted in my own life is, the story I'm telling myself is. That will change everything. So let's take a relationship fight, not that that ever happens. And so, for example, like, you don't even care what I'm doing, or you don't even care about me. That's going to go over really, really well. But if I add just those few words and say, the story I'm telling myself is that you don't care about me, completely changes it. It shifts from an accusation and a projection to a vulnerable admission. Isn't that amazing? And then that paves the way to name the truth. So one thing that I talk to my kids about, and they are scary smart emotionally. Like when I say I'm fine, these are my little ones, like 11 and 13. They're like, only fine, Dad? Like, it's amazing. And so one thing that I talked to them about this past week was, I am really good at stories. Very idealistic, very creative, and boy, oh boy, did I live in my idealism, my resentment, my frustration, and got tired of the heartbreak and figured out, what next. But it's like, I also have very high endurance, so it took a long, long time for me to get tired of my stories. And one of the best things that I have done is I process my feelings at the level of my body, not my stories. So what is the difference between pain and suffering? I believe that pain is inevitable. Like, pain is a communication system. Pain, when we feel pain, our bodies are saying, whoa, pay attention to that thing. And we should, like the fire alarm. Sometimes it's false alarm, sometimes it's a test, But one problem is that our pain signal is used by a lot of things. It's used by our body, it's used by our minds, it's used by our social systems, it's used by Netflix. It's used by all sorts of things. And so when we feel pain, we need to figure out what it is. And in my experience, one of my goals, practices, and I'm going to talk the rest of the time about practices. And the way to make a story grow, the healthy story grow, is by focusing on practices and principles. So those are the really good stories. The really good stories are to say, this is what I'm doing, or rather, this is what I'm observing, this is what I believe in, this is what I am going to do in response. We'll see what grows. And one way that I have recalibrated my heartbreak, I tend to get heartbroken a lot, is to spend it and then focus my goals on living with proper form. So instead of saying, I'm not getting what I want, those stories earlier, I say, I choose to live in this way. I choose to live in alignment with my principles, and that is enough. I believe that our healthiest relationship to the future is to design a practice that increases the chance of the outcome we want without requiring the outcome we want. There's that paradox. Because loyalty to our stories is idolatry. It is incredibly presumptuous. Because when we are loyal to the stories we tell about ourselves and who we are and what we deserve, we are saying, there is no good higher than what I can imagine. When we say we are God, that's not what we mean. That there is no good, there is no outcome better than what I can imagine. Whereas if we commit to the flow of life, if we release what we think our life needs to be, we can let grow what our life will become. We align ourselves with that divine highest life, and it becomes very often more beautiful and satisfying than we could ever imagine. So before I was a chaplain, I was a college professor for 13 years. And I was a very good college professor, really enjoyed it. And then I realized that I was a minister. Surprise, surprise. And recently, I have realized that I'm not even a minister. What I actually am is a wellness integrator. My actual highest passion is well-being. And it just so happens that like ministry and chaplaincy is a really, really amazing way to engage well-being. But if we release everything we think should be, we can see what grows, and we will be beautifully surprised. And that will put us in alignment with our highest good. So I will finish by talking about a day without stories. And I've given this presentation to hospital staff. So as I said, we can anchor ourselves in practice. When you wake up, be grateful. Say something that you are grateful for. And this works, unfortunately, our life often does revolve around work, but whether or not you have a traditional job, this practice will work. So when you wake, say something you're grateful for. And then in moments of transition, like whether you're driving to work or whether you're just transitioning from one task, be still. One of the best things you can do with your brain is nothing. It's surprisingly hard to keep this is mindfulness meditation. It's surprisingly hard to keep your brain really clear. But take a moment, whether you're washing the dishes or driving to work, to just be. Breathe, focus on your breathing. So then, when you get to work or when you get to a new transition, name your highest ideal. So my highest ideal is elegant, efficient approaches to well-being. Also the sustainable well-being of conscious life on Earth. But my approach is elegant, efficient approaches to well-being. And that, for example, is why I really enjoy taking care of staff more than patients, because it's more efficient. I like sitting with a patient and I'm good at it. But if I can help the entire operating room staff feel better, I have helped hundreds of patients. So figure out what your highest value is, no judgment. And then as you go about your day, say, I am engaging with this, like the way that I am expressing my value is I am doing this. And then while you are going throughout your day, whether it's work, whether it's something else, be in your body. So one thing I tell hospital staff is we wash our hands a lot. All of us should wash our hands a lot. While you wash your hands, feel the temperature of the water. Isn't it interesting that we don't? Take a moment to ground yourself in your bodies. Okay, so in a nutshell, I have done grief work and bereavement work for 6 years, longer than that without knowing it. Here is the essence of grief work. It's acceptance in your body. That's it. The root of the word emotion is motion. We're back to constipation, release. And genuinely letting our feelings flow through our body is one of the healthiest things we can do. And the stories we tell actually impacts the way we experience our life and our experiences in our body. We talk a lot about trauma. In fact, ironically, it's traumatizing the degree to which we talk about trauma, another paradox. But trauma is not so much what happens to you. I mean, that's the technical, physical, medical sense. But trauma is our response to what happens to us. So the story, and I'm not in any way minimizing all of the very, very difficult things that we go through as human beings, but the stories we tell is literally a matter of life and death, because the stories we tell impacts the amount of stress and trauma we hold in our bodies. And that is why the way we approach release is also a matter of life and death. So the more we're able to be in our body, also like whatever show you need to watch to give you a good cry, that's awesome. Because like whether or not it's your real life or the Great British Baking Show or whatever, like when you cry, it is processing and working through those feelings in your body. So our feelings are what we experience in our body, and our emotions are the stories we tell ourselves about our feelings in our brains. Isn't that wild? So I've mentioned that my dad and older brother, he died at 49, bipolar schizoaffective. So I've inherited really, really, really big feelings. And one of the best things I've done is make them boring. And I'm like, oh, wow, I'm experiencing a lot of anxiety in my body. It's hard to breathe and my ears are ringing. Okay. There's it, like no story to it. Like, okay, what's next? You know, isn't it funny how we're like, oh, my knee is aching? We're not like, I'm such a bad person because my knee is aching. But when it comes to emotions, we tell all the stories. I'm a bad person. I shouldn't be feeling this. You know, I resent my mother. You know, we might resent our genetics when our knees are aching. Okay, but like being in your body, if you just notice like the temperature of the water and the texture of the soap and the texture of the towel, it is amazing. Okay, so then at the end of work or at the end of a task, name one thing that's true. That was really hard. I had a hard day at work. Or I didn't like that. Or I had a really good day. Or I really appreciated this one person. Just name one thing that's true. And then when you get home or when you get to the next thing, find a way to make transitions in your body. My children have teased me because I get into pajamas in like 2 minutes flat when I get home. If I'm not in cozy clothes, they're like, Dad, you're wearing pants. What is wrong in the world? And I realized that one thing I'm doing is I'm telling my body I'm home. Isn't that amazing? I'm also like dressed paramilitary because I'm going to the prison. But I code to my body, like depending even down to what I'm wearing, like where I am. And then whenever you take a shower, start talking to yourself out loud. Like we all talk to ourselves, but start doing it out loud. So when you take a shower or a bath, say out loud, I am washing off the day. Just that simple thing will literally reduce the stress and the trauma in your life. So my approach to well-being, remember, elegant, efficient approaches to well-being, is design. And these things that I'm sharing will work whether or not you understand them, whether or not you agree to them. You just have to do it. Because what you're doing is you are plugging into the evolved wisdom of your body. And we would say your divine self. So use those rituals. And then when you are going to bed, talk to yourself again. Journal. Who journals? I've journaled obsessively since I was 8. Journaling is amazing. But journal if you can. I use Google Docs, so it's really efficient. The writing it out with your hand actually does more with your body. But if you only just say something like, I learned this about myself, or I'm proud of you. Find a time to say, I love you, I'm proud of you. Talking to yourself, because your brain can actually not differentiate between whether you're talking to yourself or whether someone else is talking to you. You can also give yourself a hug. So like what I did it this morning, is I put my hands on my gut and my chest, which is like a really powerful anchoring thing. And I do mindfulness meditation. I breathe, I be. And then I also sometimes say, you are loved, you are worthy of love. That's something I struggle with. And so I am engaging, my kids don't. I'm really proud of that. So again, these are practices that will plug into your divine self. But my thing as a Unity aspiring minister is I want to help people understand and act on the way that our evolved human natures align with our divine selves. And so again, I promise you that this will work. Take that leap, let go of your stories, be in your body, be in your relationships, be in your reality, and see what grows. Thank you.